Ministry of Social Development and Family Services is pleased to share in the annual global celebrations that commemorate the United Nations International Day of Families. The theme this year is Families and Urbanization. Urbanization reflects the shift in population from rural living to city or areas around cities. It often produces better educational, health, security, emergency response, and entertainment options for city dwellers in relation to their rural counterparts. The Ministry of Social Development and Family Services is responsible for supporting the needs of families for social services and especially our vulnerable citizens, single parents, the elderly, persons with disabilities, the poor and indigent, the homeless, among others. We encourage families to reach out to our National Family Services Division if they need support managing relationships, help with parenting, or any other challenges that they may encounter. Our crisis support suicide prevention hotline will be on stream in a matter of weeks. And through this avenue, citizens can receive an additional layer of support. We will continue to faithfully discharge our duty to the national community and especially to families, and will partner with like-minded organizations and individuals to develop and implement more family-oriented policies. This will allow our families to remain strong and resilient in the face of changing economic, technological, environmental, and social circumstances, ensuring always that no one is left behind as we help, empower, and transform lives. If you or someone you know may be in need of services provided by the National Family Services Division, please call 623-2608, extension 6701 to 6711.
And welcome back once again to It's Family Time, Let's Talk. And that was just to give you an idea of what took place basically when the Family Services Division had their Family Month and some of the activities that happened during that event. Now, as I said, today we are talking family violence, and I'd also like to let you know that you can participate in the discussion via Facebook, so please check that out, and you can post your questions to our Facebook page. We will also be opening the phone lines very shortly, and we will let you know when, and I will let you know the number that you can also call into when that in fact happens. So we're going to jump right in talking family violence this afternoon because it's a real issue. It is something that is happening in Trinidad and Tobago society, and sometimes it's overlooked, it's not looked at, it's not addressed, and we really need to do something about family violence if we want to have that family experience, that healthy family for Trinidad and Tobago, so that we have a healthy society as well. So once again, let me introduce to you Dr. Varma Dayal Singh, who is a psychiatrist as well as an independent senator. So thank you so much for being with us.
Most welcome.
As well as Superintendent Claire Guy Alleyne, who is the head of the Gender-Based Violence Unit of the TTPS. So glad to have you with.
Thank you.
Because you two are two people who can really speak to family violence. Basically, you from that psychiatrist's point of view, and you meet so many families, and of course you from when these reports come in and how it's dealt with the TTPS, and of course other issues.
Yes.
So let's get started, because family violence, and there may be so many definitions for family violence and how Trinidadians, Trinbagonians interpret family violence. So what can you tell us is family violence, Dr. Dayal Singh?
Family violence is really a situation where you may have a family unit having physical harm, emotional harm, and sometimes you find you have even a neglect that could occur. So it's really those three spectrum that occurs within a family unit. And so in a sense that when we see persons or patients in clinics and they come and they complain about the emotional aspects, you know, people may say it's just like sometimes just verbal, it's not harmful. So most persons will look at the black eye and physical problems and say it's a problem, but that's the emotional realm to it, and there's a neglect realm to it also that could occur.
And Superintendent, what are some of the aspects of violence and family violence that you see coming in to the different stations and to the victims units as well, because you are of the Special Victims Department, not SVU as we would know from, Law and Order, but the Special Victims Department. What type of things do you see coming into your department?
Well, the Special Victims Department encompasses the Child Protection Unit, the Gender-Based Violence Unit, and the Sexual Offences Unit. Now, it is critical for any country to have a specialized unit within their police organization on law enforcement to deal with these sensitive matters. At that department, we deal with family violence, intimate partner violence. We deal with children who are sexually assaulted, physically assaulted, neglected, and abandoned. We deal with those kind of matters. And then we deal with adults who are sexually assaulted. Yes?
Yeah. So basically, and how many cases do you see coming into you on average? I know Dr. Dialsingh can also answer to that, but to the units, because I think we need to know the level that Trinidad and Tobago is basically at, because sometimes I think that people are living in a wonderland and it's like, no, we don't really have those issues here. And because I don't know if it's the type of society that we are, that, we accept so many different things. So what are the cases like, the numbers with respect to that?
I don't have the exact numbers for you this afternoon, but what I can tell you, the Gender-Based Violence Unit was formed in 2020 by the Commissioner of Police. And what we see happening is that from 2020 to 2022, we have been seeing a gradual increase every year. Now, that's not a bad thing, and it's not a good thing either. When I say that to say because family violence is normally seen as a private issue. It's something that happens behind closed doors. So we don't speak about it. Yes? We would have, sometimes you would have victims or survivors going to health centers, to Dr. Dialsingh and they're seeking medical attention. And they have bruises and, black eyes and stuff like that. And they're going to make up excuses. They would not tell the doctor, here's what, my spouse, be it male or female, whoever the spouse is, inflict these injuries onto me. So we, within the TTPS, the Commissioner of Police, they saw at that time, it's time to have a specialized unit within the TTPS with highly trained officers, with elite officers to deal with gender-based and domestic violence. Now, when you create an avenue where persons feel comfortable to come forward, you may see an increase in numbers. And what we had happening in 2020 also was the pandemic. The pandemic came shortly after the unit was formed, and globally we have seen that there was an increase in family violence. But in Trinidad and Tobago, we had the unit with these specialized officers who create that atmosphere where persons can come forward and make their reports. And the thing about it is that we conducted a robust outreach program when the unit was formed. So we let, survivors understand that here's what, we are here to listen. We are here to help you, So we encourage persons to come and make the reports.
And I think it's so heartening to hear that, because I think it's about time that we had something like that in Trinidad and Tobago where you can feel safe if something is happening to you in your home, where you're supposed to feel safe, where you're supposed to find that comfort and that love. And if you don't and you're being abused, that you can actually go to someone and find that safety maybe and even help in those avenues.
Well, as healthcare providers, we actually welcome that move, because you see, we were seeing persons come into our clinic and in the psychiatric clinics, and they would have had depression, post-traumatic stress, anxiety. And when you go into that history, the history would have been that violence that occurred at the home. Now, besides the psychiatric clinic, in the medical clinics, the hospitals, sometimes you see a lady may come in with an injury, and as you quite say, they make up, they bounce into a cupboard, they fell down the stairs, and they are getting smart now. They may go San Fernando Hospital the first time, second time they may go a different hospital. So we don't have a system of tracking them, and this is something we have to develop now. And it's largely a hidden epidemic due to embarrassment. But it's estimated 1 in 3 women in their lifetime will be abused in their relationship, and 1 in 7 men. So it's there, it's a hidden epidemic, and we have to encourage persons to come forth. This is it.
Now, you did mention that there were different types of violence. I want to talk a little bit about those different types of violence. Can you name them again for us and get a little bit more in depth into what these types of violence are and, in a sense, how it starts, how you can recognize it in a sense?
The thing is, let's say a girl and her boyfriend is dating, right? The first thing you have to say, you have a dating episode, and this is where we try to tell persons, watch out for warning signs, red flags. Let's say you're dating someone, and all of a sudden that person tries to isolate you from your friends, from your church group, and even comes to your workplace and wants to wait there, don't want you to have any after-work life. So that's the first thing you have to look out for. Then when you're on your phone and you're on your WhatsApp, they always want to say, why are you on your phone? Why are you on social media? So that person is somehow trying to control your life.
Yeah. But, you know, as you say that, they say, oh, no, they love me.
Yeah.
They love me, and they want to know what I'm doing. They love me, and that's what you get.
Yeah, so they initially love that attention.
Yeah.
But we as caregivers always tell people, don't go in for a whirlwind romance. Don't make a commitment, you know, until after you're dating somebody for a while. You know, don't let it be a 6 month that you jump into this. The thing is, you look at that individual, how does that individual react to other persons? You go into a restaurant and they start to demean the waitress. They are in line in traffic and they just go in on the shoulder. That person has a problem, and you have to look at that problem and see, you know, eventually that could filter into my relationship. So this, I think, it's a issue where you have to look at that warning signals. And I always say, look for the abuse, alcohol abuse, because you find that if there is individuals who abuse alcohol and drugs, there's also a connection with that and domestic violence. So you look out for that individual, you see, and I always warn, look at the past relationships. Why did it end? Look at, you know, if this guy loves you so much and he is ill-speaking his other girlfriend, get in contact with her. Why did this end? You have to get both sides of the story.
Yeah.
So these are signs we look out for. And we tell persons to look out for those signs in a relationship. And the types of violence they have, it could start with subtle things where suddenly telling you that you're stupid, you're ignorant, you verbal, you know, things that you're slut, because if you're talking to persons, so other guys, you know, so when you start to get that language, that guy doesn't respect you. And those are, it starts like that, and eventually can escalate into physical violence. But you see, right now the researchers are looking at different types of violence. You're looking at the what you call intimate terrorism, which is the worst, the worst type of violence you have, where this guy stalks you, he will hit you, he will isolate you. That is the worst one. Then there's one where a violence where a one-off thing. A girl might get vexed, slap you for something. A one-off thing where in the past we used to think one slap is a warning sign. But so we realize, look, there's that other type of violence where may not be that, you know, it is not intimate terrorism. It's like a one-off competition. Then there's another one where two persons actually competing to who will head that household. Man and woman will try to compete, where, again, it's really a competition with clash of personalities. So there are different types of violence you get. And the problem we have as therapists is, how could we identify individual who will go and kill his wife or kill his mate? So this has always been a thing. So we look at, is it a one slap? You could talk to them, you could think, or is it an individual? And we try to identify those individuals, because if we could do that, we will be saving a lot of lives in the future.
Yes.
And
we're going to continue this discussion very shortly, because it's getting interesting now, because we're trying to find these signs that may indicate that there may be some sort of violence wanting to take place, and we really want to protect our families from that. So stay with us. It's Family Time. Let's talk. We'll continue. Don't forget, you can message us on Facebook, and we'll give you the number to call in as soon as we get back. Stay with us.
The National Family Services Division of the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services extends its support and commitment to individuals, families, and households. These support services include counseling and psychosocial support, workshops and webinars, and sensitization sessions under the parenting unit, support to grandparents raising their grandchildren under the grandparenting program. Support is offered anonymously and free of charge. For more information, please call the National Family Services Division at 623-2608 extension 6701 to 6711. The Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. Helping, empowering, transforming lives.
And welcome back to It's Family Time. Let's talk. And remember, you can, in fact, ask us questions via Facebook. So you can send your questions through like that, and we will get them answered to our panel here as well. You can give us a call at 622-4010. Now, I do have with me Dr. Varma Dayal Singh, as well as Superintendent Claire Guy Elaine, and also via Zoom, Margaret LaRose, who's a social worker from the National Family Services Division. So let me bring Ms. LaRose into the conversation here this afternoon. So good afternoon to you, Ms. LaRose.
Well, pleasant afternoon, guys. Pleasant afternoon, everyone.
Hi, so glad to have you here with us as we're talking family violence this afternoon.
Yes, we are. We are talking family violence. Okay.
Now, as Dr. Dayal Singh was mentioning about the different types of violence, and we're talking about the intimate type of violence, can you give us some more examples of what the Family Services Division tends to get, that type of issues that you tend to get there?
Okay, so when we have persons comes to us with different forms of, violent experiences, what we do as a division is we don't normally refer immediately. First of all, we assess the situation. Depending on the situation, the type of violence, we refer persons to different various agencies, one of which, of course, is the Domestic Violence Unit. Now, in cases where a woman comes to us, she has been violated, she's a victim of domestic violence, let's just say. In cases as such, she usually cannot go home. What we do, we provide shelters. We offer shelter. We offer accommodation for that person. Usually there are children involved. Now, with honesty, some of the homes, we do not have provision, unfortunately, to accommodate children of a particular age. And this has been an ongoing issue. But we do, however, try to provide immediate shelter for that person. We provide this. And of course, we guide the process of where the police becomes involved, and certain process must take place in order to arrest the situation. That's one of the things that we do as part of the division.
Right. So you do have those services in the event that a situation does arise.
Yes. One, as I said before, with shelter. In cases where a person is in a situation, counseling is not always the immediate action. Shelter is one, and of course we have to more or less do an assessment of the home. There are times when persons run, practically flee from the home. Their children are left behind, so that we involve other agencies to get on board so that they can assist, take care and provide shelter, to provide needs for that particular family. Counseling is a big part of what we do, and the person's life, definitely we counsel the person's life, we guide the process. And of course, in guiding the process, the result is really empowerment to be able to cope open mechanism to deal with issues that probably has been going on for an extensive period of time. That is part of what we do as well. We also provide a parenting skill program. That is a big thing for us in our division, because usually there's a breakdown in parenting skills in a home that more or less, involves whatever violence. There usually is, when we assess, a breakdown of parenting skills. So we provide parenting and co-parenting, depending on the situation, skills to assist persons, arising out of conflicts and different forms of violence.
Okay. Now, as we're talking about the services, and she's talking about, the various people who come into the division to access help, we think about the perpetrators and people fleeing their homes. So who would be the people fleeing these homes, and who are the perpetrators of these types of violence? Because it might be somebody that you never would have suspected would be behaving like that. So Dr. Dayal Singh, who would you say are the perpetrators of family violence?
Well, remember, the figures coming out now, it's like you have females also giving violence to their mates.
Yes.
The thing is, so while we may say it's a gender issue, and it's largely so, because the statistics show it's mainly women on the receiving end. When we look at same-sex relationships, you also have a female-female relationships. You also have gender violence occurring there. So it's really not gender, but partner violence. Yeah. So you also have to consider, so who are the perpetrators? The perpetrators really, they come in all guise, all shapes. You could never predict, but the previous habit of that individual gives us a clue. So somebody who has, for instance, violent tendencies before, aggressive nature, changing jobs, those individuals, you can probably have an idea, if you look at that history, that individual is a perpetrator, could be a perpetrator also. So therefore, it's really educating women about the danger signs to look for. And even, as I mentioned, you may have common partner violence, which is just like a one-off slap, never escalate into anything, in contrast to the terrorism, intimate terrorism. And those are the individuals that we want to catch. And there was a nurse called Jacqueline Campbell in Johns Hopkins School who developed a sort of risk assessment. And it's a beautiful risk assessment where if you actually get this individual and you could go and question that individual, we can now say that individual will be a potential killer. So so the risk assessment is so important. And this is why I say if somebody even gives you one slap, report it. Yeah. Let it come to the police service. And if the police service now has that gender-based violence, let the psychologist now assess that individual. So you see, that individual, first of all, a slapper, it may be a one-off thing, but I am now under the radar.
Yeah.
So therefore, and being under the radar could prevent that person from hitting again. Because what we found was that if somebody, perpetrates violence against an individual, within a year, 42% again will come back with another report. So we have to look at that statistic.
Now, I want to talk about violence against children, but before that, I want to just touch with respect to where he says if there's violence with partner violence, and it may be a repeat offender, what steps did the TTPS take if, someone comes to report an issue such as this, that I got hit? Whether it be male or female. And I know you're focusing more on the male being the violent, the perpetrator. Yeah. And there are aggressive women as well who are perpetrators. But what does what does the TTPS do? Because, you hear so many stories, men don't want to go because they feel they're going to be laughed at, and, a man doing this. And sometimes women don't want to go as well because they're afraid, because they think that nothing's going to be happening, and they go back and you don't know what's going to be happening in your home situation if you go back. So what are the steps that, what happens with the TTPS when these reports come into them?
And those situations are real.
Yes.
Real as can be. And that is why training is critical. The Commissioner of Police, McDonald Jacob, he would have sent a team of us at the NYPD to train us on gender-based violence. We also went to Jamaica at a workshop. As we speak, 2 officers, Assistant Commissioner Cooper and Inspector Bacchus, they are coming back from Canada. I'm so excited to hear what they learn because, I'm so passionate about this thing. Now, one thing I tell survivors, anytime someone tell you they're going to kill you, they're going to beat you, they're going to damage you, believe them. Don't sit and say those are only words. It starts like that. So whenever we get those reports, we treat them very, very seriously. Now, sometimes you would hear public outcry and the police, the police has the bad end of the stick. Yeah. But what persons don't recognize is that when a report is made, that is not it. That is not be it all. That matter has to be investigated. A statement has to be recorded from the survivor or the person making the report, be it man or woman. And I'm happy to say that over the years, we are seeing more male victims and survivors coming forward, and we are encouraging that. Because something we have recognized within the unit as well is that sometimes when the male is portrayed as the perpetrator, when we dig deeper, he was actually the victim. But when the lashing out took place, he becomes the perpetrator now. So that is why we have to keep that conversation alive and let persons understand, the public, domestic violence, violence on the whole, be it from school to adulthood, we are not going to tolerate it. It is unacceptable. Let us look at other ways of dealing with conflict within the family, even within the school environment. We really need to. Now, when perpetrators and survivors come to the TTPS, if the matter is not enough to go before the court, all of our victims are referred to the TTPS Victim and Witness Support Unit for psychosocial support. Now, there are times, let us face the reality. The reality is that most violence takes place with persons who love or loved each other. And sometimes the survivor just wants the violence to stop and everything to normalize. Yes? So sometimes we don't get a statement. We don't have enough evidence to go forward. But that doesn't mean that as law enforcement we are going to say that's it. We stick there with them.
Good.
We refer them for psychosocial. The Ministry of Social Development, they assist us a lot. We work very closely with them. We also work with Families in Action, because let us face it, TTPS cannot do it alone. You have, in order to deal with domestic violence or gender-based violence, you have to have a multi-sectoral approach. The health sector, the Ministry of Social Development, NGOs, everybody have their part to play.
Everybody
so that
has
is
to
critical.
come together. It definitely is.
Yes.
And we're going to continue this discussion. We're also going to answer, we've got a question via social media. Given what is taking place at our nation's schools in terms of violent behavior, because we've been seeing it, not that it hasn't been there before, but everybody has social media now, so we're seeing it more often than we should. In a positive, how do we discipline our children in a positive way? And since this is also an important family role. So we'll deal with that question when we get back. And don't forget, you can send your questions to our Facebook page. And you can also give us a call at 622-4010. So stay with us. We'll be right back and answer your questions.
The National Family Services Division of the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services extends its support and commitment to individuals, families, and households. These support services include counseling and psychosocial support, workshops and webinars, and sensitization sessions under the parenting unit, support to grandparents raising their grandchildren under the grandparenting program. Support is offered anonymously and free of charge. For more information, please call the National Family Services Division at 623-2608, extension 6701 to 6711. The Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. Helping, empowering, transforming lives.
And welcome back to It's Family Time, Let's Talk. We are speaking about family violence here, and I do have with me Dr. Varma Diyal Singh. I've also got Superintendent, not Senior Superintendent, but Superintendent Claire Guy Allain, as well as from the Family Services Division, Margaret LaRose. And we did get a question via Facebook a little while ago, and the question basically is, given what is taking place in nation's schools in terms of violent behavior, which we have been seeing, and in terms of violent behavior, how do we discipline our children in a positive way? Since, too, this is an important family role. How do we discipline our children in an important way? And I'm going to tie it into abuse of children at home as well. But how do we do this? What do we do? How do we train our children not to display these acts of violence? And where does it come from in the first place? You know, you think about it. Is it from home? What is it? What makes children behave like in this way, especially in the school environment?
Well, there was an old study done by Dr. Daphne Phillips where she looked at certain schools. She interviewed the violent children and she said, what causes those children to be violent? And the figures was startling. It showed, I think it was about 30 to 40% of those kids were sexually abused. Some of them were physically abused, and then there's a figure with neglect, a figure, you know, so when you looked at violent kids, you have to realize it's not just some children acting out and just being, you know, don't know how to curb their emotions. Things may be going home. So therefore, a violent child is a child crying out for help. So first thing, you see a child in school, you need to find out from the social workers what's going on in that home, that child's home. So that child may have some sort of trauma in the home. Neglect, poverty is also one. And if with post-COVID and the economy as it is, poverty will be increasing. So therefore, so we may expect more violence to come about because of what's happening globally in the world. So therefore, you have to look at that kid. You have to look what's going on home. And then you have to look not just the home, but the home is one thing, but you look at the peers. Yeah. So you may have a good home situation, but if you go in school and you're now starting to go with the bad boys, the bad girls, you now have to show your dominance and peer pressure and peer, they want to show that they belong. So you look at the peers, you look at community. Yeah. So if you look at a community, you found there's something called community efficacy, where you see you may have two poor communities, but one community may have more social interaction, more positive interaction where they go as a community and do things, while another community, because of the social, how it's built, the police intervention there, that, you find that certain communities may not have that collective. So again, violence could be abated by community togetherness. So you look at the individual home, you look at the peer pressure, you look at the community, you look at society at large. What's going on out there? The gang violence. It actually, if you're seeing violence all over, in your song, in your music, you will want to act out in your video games. You'd want to automatically hit out. So all these things we have to look at. Yeah. And we also look at the fact that when kids are growing up, the hormones could make them act out. So we have to appreciate this. Young children, they have to learn how to taper their hormones. So a child, nothing may be wrong with that child, everything could be perfect, but that aggression, that testosterone, you have to tell that child, hey, we're handling it differently.
And I want to throw this out to Margaret LaRose of the Family Services Division. What are some of the services that can be offered with respect to violence in schools and with these children who are acting out violently?
When children are displaying different levels of violence, and yes, they are referred to us, we get down to the nitty-gritty. As the doctor rightfully said, contributing factors, environmental aspect, home life. It's a bit tricky. So we do assess these children. Of course, the assessment takes place sometimes, depending on the age group, the parents, would have to sit in. We also involve the parents we have to involve the parents. When we have discovered based on assessment what the problem or problems are, we usually involve the family. And the counseling process is basically what we do to be able to guide or to help parents to understand the crisis or the trauma, what that child currently faces. It's really quite challenging, especially since most of those children, their personality has already been formed. This situation has been going on like forever. And usually what we have found is that it's family life, financial issue, verbal abuse, physical abuse. So we counsel these parents, help them to understand how to be a better parent, healthy parental skills. It's always usually the parents who we have to focus on in order to reach their child, to reach their children. There are cases where after assessment, we realize, listen, this is out of our hands. So we do refer because it makes sense. We work alongside most agencies to be able to assist us. We combine in order to get a positive result. But we counsel, we refer the parents, we target the parents. We have workshops where parents can get themselves involved so that they can know and understand how to break that barrier. These are some of the things that we do.
Okay, great. And I want to get back to talking about, she's talking about, the parent plays such an important role in developing their young child, counseling, being a part of that child's life, being a loving part of that child's life. Unfortunately, sometimes that parent can also be part of the violence.
Yes.
So what are some of these things? And, you think about these children in these homes, and so many times, a lot of these children, you don't know about them. What are some of the types of violence that children may experience at home?
Well, a lot of children may have like the verbal, emotional abuse. Your parents say you're stupid, you're dotish, and you put in that in the child's brain, and the child will go through life thinking, I'm a nobody. So the child may want to show they're somebody by going to school and being the boss in that school. So they putting down a child is first thing verbally. Then you have the physical abuse, because you see there's different parenting style and skills, and there's the authoritarian parenting where you just tell the child, look, you just have to listen, and if you don't listen, you sometimes spank the child, beat the child in a way. So physical abuse is a problem. And again, sexual abuse is something in our country that it's there, and we are hearing about it. We are encouraging children to come out and seek help. And so you have all this type of abuse occurring. And you found that children themselves, if a child even has a developmental problem in terms of language or dyslexia or some other developmental skill, that child may not perform well in school. The parent might not recognize it, and the child will go to school and act out because you can't learn. The normal learning process is not there. So recognizing those children who are violent also means a psychoeducational assessment to make sure that child doesn't have a learning disability. Because if I can't understand what the teacher is saying, I'm going to disrupt that class. Yes. You understand? Yeah. Now, the parents themselves, you see the difficulty we had, and this discussion I had years ago when there was Norris Marshall, remember he was the MP until years ago.
Yes.
We had discussions, how do we rescue these homes? And we realized if there's a young mother who is pregnant, and she probably get fooled, or she has this child, we need to take that mother and allow that mother to stay with that child for the first 2 years. 2 years is where a child has attachment. Now, this is something out for debate, because a child will be attached to that loving figure. So we always had that notion that if that mother could have stayed, continue education, but you now will be allowed to stay with your child, bond with your child, breastfeed your child, and you learn a skill. So those who don't want to do, you have a skill set, but you're with your child for the 2 years. And that is something, when that child gets that love from that mother, you find that can help society long. So this is something we have to look at. Young single mothers, do we give them a grant to stay home to empower themselves when they are there, learn education, learn a skill, so this is our way. Now, remember, poverty is something. If you are a mother and you're struggling, sometimes you don't have time to really teach that child things. So you're highly dependent on the other generations if they're there. You're highly dependent on the teachers. You see, the role of a teacher is so important, that if you are seeing a child falling back, or you have to provide a mentorship for that child also, because the child may not have examples out there. Mother working, single mother, just depending on the 8 hours in school. So to solve that problem of violence, the child has to learn in school is a different environment from my community. When I go to school, there are rules. I have to learn to obey those rules. I have to respect other people within that 8 hours, and I'm learning that. And this is how we have to start forward now with the kids in school.
All right, great. And we are continuing the discussion. Family violence is the topic this today on It's Family Time, Let's Talk. We take a short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us.
National Family Services Division of the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services extends its support and commitment to individuals, families, and households. These support services include counseling and psychosocial support, workshops and webinars, and sensitization sessions under the parenting unit, support to grandparents raising their grandchildren under the grandparenting program. Support is offered anonymously and free of charge. For more information, please call the National Family Services Division at 623-2608, extension 6701 to 6711. The Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. Helping, empowering, transforming lives.
And we are back here. It's Family Time, Let's Talk on TTT. And so glad to have you with Dr. Varma Dayal Singh, as well as Superintendent Guy Alleyne. And of course, via Zoom, we do have Margaret LaRose, who is a social worker with the National Family Services Division. We are talking family violence this afternoon, a real topic, a real issue that happens in Trinidad and Tobago. As much as we may want to sweep it under the carpet, it happens all the time, and sometimes we may not even recognize it. And I do have a couple questions via our Facebook page, but I just want to ask one thing of Dr. Dayal Singh as well, and recognizing, in a sense, how do you know, or what are some of the signs that can actually indicate abuse happening in a family, simply because it may not show itself at all, because the perpetrators could be real monsters at home.
Yes.
And outside, they're the best, most darling, and nobody can believe that they're actually doing this. So how can one, and like when the TTPS, and I'll ask you that question too, how would you recognize these behaviors? And how would you be able to believe that, yes, this is really happening? What are those signs?
Well, it's difficult. As you mentioned, it's behind the closed doors that we wouldn't have an idea what's happening. This is why it's so difficult as persons who are planning policy to know what's going on behind closed doors. So this will always be an issue unless we have persons coming forth. Now, the wife may not come forth because she may be, you know, there are certain, we in psychology, psychiatry, there's certain things what we call, it's like psychological chains that bind a woman that she don't want to leave a relationship. So like Stockholm Syndrome, if you remember those things. Then there's something called the traumatic bonding theory, where if a lady grows up in a home where she witnesses that violence, she thinks it's part of love.
Normal.
Yeah, it's normal.
Yeah.
That's how the man loves me. He beats me. So she equates love with beating. If he doesn't beat, he doesn't love me. And then there's the psychological entrapment theory too, where you actually invest so much in the wedding wedding dress, wedding pictures, you're showing off with your friends. You want to hide that because you don't want to show people you're having this monster. But how we recognize it is if suddenly that lady is being isolated. So the family says, but she's not coming to any family functions. The friends and work say, but look, she's not coming to any after work line. So suddenly she's being isolated. This is a way that the persons around now could say something is happening to her. If you're calling your friend and suddenly she's not answering, she doesn't want to answer, always say, my husband here, I can't talk. This is something. What we found is when pregnant women were going to the certain hospitals with their mates, they want to be present all the time. And there's something called this, what do you call it? The midwives actually had something called PREMS, where it was a sort of a program where they try to identify when women come for antenatal care. Then you may be able to pick up that they are being abused. Wow. So they will try to keep those women separate from their husbands and say, anything going on home, any problems, I think. Because we realize that is the way you can get them. And sometimes my husband comes in and he wants to be in the room with them and answers all the questions. So if he's answering all the questions, not allowing that woman to answer, that's a warning sign. So therefore, trying to get these women is really looking at a change in their lifestyles from before. Suddenly they are dressing differently. He wants them to dress with long dress, not to put on makeup, not to look sexy. That's a sign of control.
Now, you're talking, and again, mainly from the man's perspective. Yes. What about when the woman is the perpetrator? How do you recognize that? Because sometimes it's so much more subtle, but it's happening and it's just as bad. So what are some of those signs? What do you pick up? And especially when you have to check these things out with the TTPS, how do you investigate issues like that?
And that is it. We investigate. So the report is made, and we start from the stance where you believe your victim or survivor. And sometimes the victim or survivor has nobody else but law enforcement behind them. And I say that because you would hear family members saying, he's such a nice man. You talk about the monster behavior, Doc talk about it. He's such a nice person. She's such a nice person. But behind closed door, they have monster tendencies. So once they reach us, we are trained to hear as what? We believe our survivor, we investigate, we go out to see whether they are witnesses. Sometimes the children or other family members in the house would be witnesses to these matters. Yes?
Yeah. But how do you get them to talk, Doc?
Well, okay, let's say somebody comes in, what we call the panda eye. They have a black eye. Right away, we have a warning signal. That person was struck in the eye. So we try to get them to speak. And sometimes they may, if you really try to tell them that, look, there's help also, we will be there, we could carry through that. Some of them may break down and admit that they have a problem. That's when you're in a casualty setting. But you see, we lose them. If they don't go and make a report, how are you going after that? This is why sometimes we need a sort of a system where hospitals could kind of integrate, but then they can go to the private doctor too. And this is all these. So suspected cases of assault, people don't really report it. So one way you could get it is if a lady keeps coming in or a guy keeps coming in with marks and bruises, something is happening there, and it warrants further investigation. So probably anybody comes in with sort of wounds like that, we should now have a system where the social worker on the hospital could go in that home and track that individual. Sometimes we depend on family members to call in and say something is happening. Also to say, well, my daughter suddenly she doesn't come out. He is controlling her totally. And if you look at children now, if a child is being abused, there is a change in personality. So a child who may be all the time quiet suddenly gets loud, or a child who's always talking suddenly starts withdrawing. And then sometimes you look at how the individual dresses. She may have on dark glasses to hide her marks and long clothes to hide any sort of scratches or bruises. So we could suspect, but then how could we go into our home? You see, this is the private thing. This is where the law is. It will prevent us. And you see, even though a lady may come and give a report, she may withdraw that report after.
Correct.
You see, there's something called a cycle of violence, where and this is something that at Duluth they had this cycle of violence where it's something we try to tell women how to understand it. The guy will beat you, he will hit you, he will put all his rage. But after that now, there's a makeup phase.
Yes.
Where he comes, and we call that the honeymoon period. Darling, sorry, I will die without you. You are the only one could help me. And the woman will fall for that.
Again,
If you leave me, I'll kill myself. Forgive me, love. And then honeymoon phase, he will give her gifts and whatnot. I had a girl who actually went back to her husband after she got burnt, went back when he came with her asking her to come for KFC. So a box of KFC called that lady to die later on, went back. So after that honeymoon, when you caught them, and a soft-hearted woman, look, I could help him. I could help him. Nobody else could help him.
Yes.
Goes back, and then it builds back up again and escalates. So that's a known cycle. We try to tell women it occurs. Don't get trapped in it.
Yes.
Reach out for help when you see that cycle.
Superintendent, in events like this, what are the numbers that they can contact the divisions that you're associated with, the victims unit and all that? What are those numbers that they can call to get help?
Right. We have, once it's an emergency, the incident is happening now, you can call 999, right? We also have the 555. We have 800 tips for persons who may want to call in anonymously. We have access to the TTPS app, which is a great tool that every citizen in Trinidad and Tobago should download and make use of it. My secretariat, my office is based at Serpentine Road at Sinclair. It's a new state-of-the-art building that the Commissioner of Police, Minister of National Security, it was opened a couple of weeks ago. It's a really beautiful building with interview rooms for children, interview rooms for adults, right? So we are encouraging persons to come forward and make the reports and let the matters be investigated. Because one, domestic violence is one too much.
That's so right.
Yes.
Yes. And we are talking family violence here on It's Family Time. Let's talk. We continue right after this. Stay with us.
The National Family Services Division of the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services extends its support and commitment to individuals, families, and households. These support services include counseling and psychosocial support, workshops and webinars, and sensitization sessions under the parenting unit, support to grandparents raising their grandchildren under the grandparenting program. Support is offered anonymously and free of charge. For more information, please call the National Family Services Division at 623-2608, extension 6701 to 6711. The Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. Helping, empowering, transforming lives.
And we are back. It's Family Time. Let's talk. Family violence is the topic of the day. Of course, Dr. Varma Diyal Singh with me, Superintendent Claire Guy Lane, and from the Family Services Division, Margaret LaRose, via Zoom and via on the phone as well. And family violence. And, you know, we just have a few more minutes to go, but breaking that cycle is something that is so important. And if you could somehow give us an idea of how, because it happens and it happens. That's why they call it the cycle. How can we actually break that cycle? What can we tell the victims?
Well, the thing is, we always try to tell the victims that, listen, there is hope. There's places we could put them, places of safety. And we try to get that their relatives and their friends to come on board. So it's like a whole team working together. So it's we are actually telling them this. Now, some of them, because of their children and having to move children to this school and that school, they don't want to go. But we are getting more cooperation now with the Ministry of Education along that pathway. The other thing too is moving out with the kids, starting afresh. We have to put it that, okay, you got a mate that was not the right person, time you move out. But you see, the psychological change of entrapment is so difficult. Sometimes it's difficult. It's like the ladies can't help it. So again, in the future, we may have to develop a system where if a lady, we think that lady is under a risk of seriously death or dying, or the children, and their relatives make an application. Now, this is something, a new thing where the law will have to consider, where we are able now to go and rescue that woman from themselves. Because if they so it comes like we have documentation she was injured. The family come forth and say they suspect this, and that way we have to rescue that woman from themselves, carry them away from that situation where now we could now try to retrain our mind, because sometimes in this relationship it comes like you're in a cult, your whole mind change and you're trapped. So sometimes this is something in the future we have to look at, because it's a problem in society. And
what do you say as a member of the TTPS and the Victims Unit?
You know, as I listened to Dr. Diallo saying, it brought me back to a conversation I was having with a survivor just this week, and she was telling me she was in a marriage for 30 years, and only on the 30th, she recognized that she was being abused. Yes?
Yeah.
And she came forward to the gender-based violence unit in Carenage, and she was shocked. And from that day, the officer spoke to her. She has never turned back.
Brilliant.
One of the things I wish that we can create in Trinidad and Tobago, because we all have to be victim-centered. We need to have a one-stop shop. So you come to the doctor. Just on the other floor, the police is there. We have social development on another floor. So it's a one-stop shop for our survivors to seek help and assistance.
Dr. Diyal Singh, your final comments?
My final comment is really to appeal to women out there. If you hear this program, you know there's help, you know there's a new unit. And also relatives. See your relatives who cannot help themselves and contact Claire, that she will say, listen, we want to look at this home, because sometimes your own relatives wouldn't want to come, the victim wouldn't want to come forward. Highly dependent on relatives and friends, look and reach out to help for them.
Superintendent?
Yes, and I'm saying, do not sit and take violence, do not encourage it, be there for each other, and let us try to make Trinidad and Tobago domestic violence free, so everyone can live happily, because domestic violence is a very big and grave breach of one's human rights. Yes?
And Margaret LaRose, your final comments?
My final comment to persons who are experiencing any form of violence is that you should choose life. When you choose life, there is hope. I know oftentimes there's so many things that to be considered. The children, the finances, where would I sleep? What happens next? My final word is to let you know that there is hope and there are help out there.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Diyal Singh. Thank you so much, Superintendent. And thank you so much, Margaret LaRose. This has been It's Family Time, Let's Talk. This is the second part. We've got more for you next week. Thank you so much for joining us. See you next week.
This is TTT. Live for local.